Welcome back to Tackle the Numbers, the channel where I try to predict the absolute chaos of the 2021 Major League Rugby season. My name is Alistair Poole. In case you didn't know, this video also exists as a podcast. If you'd rather listen than watch, follow the link in the video description. Anyone paying any attention to last weekend knows that it was wild. Monday Morning Fly Half summed it up pretty well with the headline, "Why do I even make picks?" And the numbers bear this out. This week brought the accuracy of my model to barely better than random. Over half the matches fell outside of my 10-point standard deviation. Last week was surprisingly accurate, so regression to the mean was expected, but this was an overcorrection into chaos. Still, it's worth noting that there was really only one score that was wildly outside of expectations. Houston scoring 0 when they were predicted to score 30 is single-handedly messing everything up. Remove that one score from the data, and everything is reasonable again. The trend line starts heading in the right direction, and normality is restored. Of course, you can't just ignore data points because you don't like them. But this does show an important point. This early in the season, a single match can still dramatically swing my model's accuracy. So I'm not really concerned about this in the long term. What we're seeing here is chaos in the early season, a lot of rust, and overall this will even out as the season goes on. On to the matches. First up, Rooney got wrecked by Nola in the gold mine, 51-29. I predicted Rooney to take it by 1, 24-23. My prediction for Rooney's score was actually pretty close. I mean, they scored 28 when I predicted they'd score 24, but man, did I undersell Nola. They outperformed by a whopping 29 points. Of course, the match felt a little closer than that watching it, especially in the first half. And man, Nola needs to get their penalties under control. Obviously, giving up that many points pretty much wrecked Rooney's defensive baseline, which went up by almost 7 points to 32.5. Since they didn't score a crazy amount like last week, their attack also regressed towards the mean, dropping 3 points to +4. Overall, their combined margin plummeted 4.5 points to -2.6, again, basically because of that defensive baseline. Rooney's pain is Nola's gain, though. Their attack spiked up significantly. It went up 7 points to 5.8. However, this only provided a minor boost to their combined margin. This is because their defense continues to look more and more average. Their defense got about 1.5 points worse, leaving them at 25 points, which really isn't that much better than average. And frankly, it makes sense. They haven't had a good defensive performance in quite a while. On to the next upset. Rugby ATL, expected to win 22-21, instead lost to Old Glory on the road, 33-30. This is the match that was overall closest to my prediction, even though it got the margin about 8 points off. The Rattlers lost all the ground they'd made from the dominant defeat of Toronto in Week 1. Their defensive average went back to where it was before the season, 24.7. And their attack has slipped from exactly average to -1.8. This puts their combined margin at 0.7, which is just a bit worse than where they were to start the season. Old Glory, on the other hand, just keeps improving. Their defense improved a hair to a solid 22.6 points, while their attack has risen steadily to a nice round 3 points. This led their combined margin to rise up to 2.8 overall. This isn't driven by any spectacular results, but Old Glory has been consistently playing better than expected. Next, we visit the scattered remains of the Sabercats in Aviva Stadium. Houston was expected to beat the Free Jacks by 6, 30-24. Instead, they were denied even a single point as New England won 32-0. Literally no one saw this coming. And again, this match is by far the biggest thing throwing off my accuracy numbers. I mean, some people thought New England would win, but man, this was a demolition, which especially after New England's dramatic loss to LA in Week 1, I don't know how you would see this coming. Now, if you're a rugby team whose defense has been steadily worsening, how do you dig yourself out? Apparently, all you need to do is pitch a shutout and your problems are solved. The Free Jacks, who until now had by far the worst defense in the league, improved an insane 11 points to be right about average at 26.3 in their defensive baseline. This caused their combined margin to jump up 6 points to a dead average 0.0. Their attack did worsen slightly, going down to minus 0.6, but overall the model has been convinced this team might be able to get it done. And Houston naturally did drop from this. The biggest drop, rather obviously, was on attack, where they plummeted to minus 10.6, which isn't quite the worst attack we've ever seen, but it's not far off. But they also suffered on defense, which has been steadily worsening and now sits at 27.2, which is a bit worse than average. Overall, this brought the once average team to a combined margin of minus 2.5. If you expected this drop to be bigger, just remember that the model weights defense much more heavily than attack. So even though they weren't able to score at all, and that really hit their attack hard, that's only going to have so big of an effect on their overall combined margin. The final upset of this week was Utah beating Toronto 39-24. Toronto was expected to take this one by my model by 5 points, 25-20, and instead they were pretty much blown out. And even if this isn't vintage Toronto, this was still a really great win for Utah. They're a team that has suffered so much with consistency over the years, so to string 2 decent results back to back, maybe they've put those days behind them. And on that point, we can be pretty darn sure that this isn't vintage Toronto. The arrows have already hit their apex and are on a parabolic path downwards into the ground. Their defense has been steadily worsening and now sits at a very average 25.5. Their attack has also been steadily dropping, ending this week at minus 2.8. Overall, despite starting the season as the best team in the league in my numbers, they are now dead average in the model. Their combined margin is an even 0.0. Utah, on the other hand, is finally getting some respect in the model. Their defense has been up and down, but right now it's up. Their baseline improved by 2 points to 25.2. On attack, they saw a much bigger boost, which makes sense considering they scored 39 points. It went up by 4.5 points to 1.2, and this puts their combined margin at an even 1 point above average. Let's see if they can actually stay there. Next, we have the heartbreaker between San Diego and Austin. Austin led the match most of the time, and then San Diego just stole it at the last minute with a wonderful try. I got the margin on this match basically right. I predicted that the Legion would win by 2 points when they actually won by 3. Where I was totally off were the scores. I had the final score at 26-24 when it was actually 14-11. Still, this week I will take the wins where I can get them, and I will count this as a win for my model. And just like my model, San Diego sorely needed a boost to its credibility. Like the arrows, they have been steadily trending downwards. This win gave them the boost that they needed to stay above average. Sure, their attack fell off a cliff, dropping 6 points to minus 2.2. But by only giving up 11 points, their defense returned to its former place of 21.6. Overall, this helped them rise slightly to a combined margin of 2.3. That is not bad, San Diego. And even though they lost the match, Austin's also got a boost from this week. Their attack did sink to minus 3.4, but their defense improved by almost 7 points to 21.9. That is a ridiculous jump, but it doesn't just come from this result. Austin's defense has been improving for a little while, and overall, they have finally made it above average. They now sit at a combined margin of 1.9. The comeback, folks, is underway. The final match of the weekend was a rather one-sided affair between Seattle and Los Angeles. This had the biggest predicted spread, LA by 7, 30-23, but even that was a dramatic underestimate. Once again, LA scored in buckets to make it 57-26. They sure are getting off to a flying start. I did pretty much nail Seattle's score, but man, LA continues to defy expectations. The same cannot be said for Seattle. Going into this match, they had been a consistently subpar team. However, giving up 57 points will pretty quickly ruin your rating in the GRI. Sure enough, their defense got worse by 8 points and now stands at 39.8. That drove their combined margin down to a dismal minus 6.9. On attack, they actually improved by a point to 2.6, but that's pretty much irrelevant given their defense. It may be good for Seattle that they have a bye week to take this all in. After 2 stellar performances, LA's attack has skyrocketed. Right now, they have a record high attacking average of 16.5. We have never seen an attacking average that high in the entire history of the league. That stratospheric attack has put them at the top of the table with a combined margin of 4.9. Of course, take it with a grain of salt, as they are a brand new team, and they only have 2 weeks of data. They also have yet to play a good defensive team. I mean, Seattle wasn't looking great even before this match, and New England is at best wildly inconsistent. Until that shutout of Houston last weekend, they hadn't given up less than 30 points. Which is not to say that LA isn't a great team. They might be. I'm just not ready to say it without a doubt. And speaking of defense, LA's defense has hovered right around average, currently resting at 26.3. We have no idea whether that's accurate, though, as so far they really haven't had to play any defense. I mean, when you're up by several tries, you just don't need to put any effort into defense. It's kind of a shame that LA has a bye week this week, because it means that we aren't going to learn more about them for a little while. That's it for last week's matches. In the rankings, we saw a lot of movement this week. LA still sits at the top spot, but next in line is now Old Glory, followed by San Diego and NOLA. Rooney and Toronto had big drops down the power rankings. The biggest climber this week was Austin, who now stand at 3rd in the West, which is still pretty mind-blowing. And Rugby ATL deserves a mention here as well, because they dropped 5 spots in the rankings, even though their combined margin barely moved. It's just that a bunch of teams got better. On to next week's matches. It's a short week with only 4 matches happening. LA, Seattle, NOLA, and Rooney all have byes this week. First up is Utah visiting New England for the first home game of the Free Jacks' existence, which I know is exciting for those fans. They've been waiting a long time for this. Utah is expected to take it by 1 point, 24-23, which equates to about a 53% chance of winning. I don't think this match will be that close, though. Both teams have been all over the place, so I expect one of them's going to have a good night and the other will have a bad night. I just don't know who. Utah is going to want to build on their momentum, while the Free Jacks will want to win their first home match. So really, I think it could go either way, and I expect it to be a blowout either way. Next up, we have the Arrows visiting Old Glory DC. Just a couple of weeks ago, this was looking like a fairly sure defeat for Old Glory, but given their recent performances, Old Glory is now favored to win by 3, 24-21. That's a 58% chance of victory for the home team. The Arrows could make a comeback. Certainly, they're going to be feeling very driven to correct this slow start to the season. But is that going to be enough to get through an in-form and consistently in-form DC team? Personally, I think Old Glory is going to cover here. Another interesting matchup, San Diego visits Atlanta. Perhaps counterintuitively, San Diego is expected to take this by 2 points, 23-21. By my numbers, there's a 55% chance the Legion comes out ahead. I expect a lot of people will be giving ATL the nod in this one. They feel like they've had the better season so far. But the model saw last week as a confirmation of San Diego's defensive prowess, and therefore is putting them out ahead. Regardless, I don't think this one's going to be a high-scoring affair. The last match this week will be the 6th edition of the Texas Cup, Houston at Austin. Because of the model's newfound respect for Austin, they are expected to win this one, 24-20. That gives them the best odds of victory of any team this weekend at 62%. This match will really tell us where these teams stand. A good showing for Austin might finally mean they've banished the demons of their winless season. Houston, on the other hand, needs to put some points on the board this week. I can't stress enough how important just putting some points on the board this week is. Personally, I think it'll be close, but I think Austin will take it. I don't know if they're going to cover, though. I sort of feel like they will, but it's really hard to know this early in the season. Big picture this weekend, I'm expecting to see 1 to 2 upsets, although getting 3 isn't out of the question. All of these matches are really tight, so at least 1 upset is pretty likely. Well, that's all from me for this week. Remember, if you want to pick against my numbers, you can do so over at tacklethenumbers.gloriousrugby.com. If you have questions or comments for the show, you can reach me at tacklethenumbers@gloriousrugby.com. Till next time, folks.